It's my pleasure to present the Canadian Jewish Literary Award for Yiddish. It's a very important award for me, and I'm always happy to be the one who gets to present it. Yiddish was so much a part of my milieu. That's what I grew up with. My heroes weren't Elvis Presley. They were Chaim Grade, Sutzkever, Rachel Korn, Melech Ravitch, Ida Mazi. These were the people who resonated in my life, because I was brought up not just Jewish, but Yiddish, and Yiddish was something that was very special when I was growing up in Montreal. It was not just about a language, it's about values and community, and the community that I knew because of my family were the Yiddish poets, the ones that I've mentioned, came to our living room, they drank tea with us, and it meant an awful lot to me, and it still does. And I'm very glad that Seymour Mayne, who is the recipient of the award this year, was able to capture it, not just the Yiddish part of it, but in his translations of the Yiddish writers, to capture the essence of Yiddish and what it means that goes beyond the language, but to a sense of community and a sense of belonging and a sense of understanding. Mein Tate, Avrame Trapunski, sie war eine Kämpfer für Yiddish. My father was a champion for Yiddish. Wollte gewinnt zufrieden, als es noch da Menschen, was wollen hören a Yiddish word. He would have been proud that there are still people who want to hear a Yiddish word. And there are many of those here today who've joined us who care about Yiddish as well, and I welcome you and I thank you for being here. Ich bin zufrieden, auch zu bekennen, der Schreiber Seymour Mayne. Sein Buch In Your Words, Translations from the Yiddish and the Hebrew, seinen Übersetzungen von den Liedern von Rachel Korn, Melech Ravitch, Judith Siegel und Avram Sutzkever. Sie seien gewesen alle Gast by the Tisch von mein Tate. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm very happy to present to you the writer, the translator, the poet, Professor Seymour Mayne.
Thank you, Ed, and thank you for leaving your notes behind as well for me. It's a dark afternoon. I listened to the subjects of all the other books, so I thought I'd introduce a little levity here and there, because how do we face the darkness but with levity? But first I want to thank the the committee. They've given me 5 times as much time as the Oscars give people who win awards to speak, say a few words. And for the work of the committee, my publisher, well, you started to hear about them, the Brian Company, who have determined to publish all my work at this point in my life. The new book and to harvest all my books, my selected stories, which you'll see outside, a new book of poetry, my selected translation, and soon the book I'm holding back, my collected poems in 2 volumes. So it's been a long time since I began to write. There are 2 people I wish were here to join. My mother, we all like to call it my mother. My mother used to love it when I got citations in the Jewish community, and especially if it was mentioned in the Canadian Jewish News, which she read like the New York Times, which my colleagues read. She read everything and clipped everything. And a dear friend who passed away 3 years ago, Adam Furstenberg, who was really the founder of these awards way back here in Toronto, who brought his zeal to support writers. And I do miss having him near me, or at least near the phone, because we love to talk on the phone when we couldn't meet together and do 2 things we love, to schmooze and to eat. I finally made him into a part-time vegetarian. It took a long time, but I succeeded. So I heard an apocryphal story a number of years ago in Montreal that happened at the Siegel Center. And a young lecturer came to speak about a subject about Eastern Europe. And he began to speak, And there was a crowd, there was a crowd of people, mostly older people from one of the retirement residences, and he began to speak. And one of the older ladies was very upset. She started saying, Red Yiddish, Red Yiddish. And he was very embarrassed because he wasn't capable of doing that. And he continued, and she continued to heckle him, Red Yiddish. And he was just, brought to, silence. Whereupon an older man sitting next to the woman looked at her and yelled at her, shut up! And her eyes lit up. She said, oh, what's ein Yiddish word? At least one Yiddish word was spoken. But the Yiddish, of course, always had for me, and as Ed told stories, for me it was the family language. But I was thinking the other day that by the time I got to grade 8 in Herzliya High School, Montreal, I had to negotiate 5 languages in a given day. And so translating over the years was nothing special. I always did translation. I didn't decide to be a translator or a poet or a short story writer or a scholar. Translation was always there. And what I wanted to do in this book was to cull over 40 years of translations from 2 languages. I translated from 3 others. The poems that I liked best that I translated and published in Yiddish and in Hebrew. And it wasn't for the community itself that kind of grabbed me, put me into the school system, gave me the Jewish Public Library. I met the older Yiddish writers. I never would have really gravitated to doing some of the literary work I did, both in Jewish Canadian literature and also in translation. The late David Rome, director, gave me a strong sense early in life that there was a new literature forming in Canada called Jewish Canadian literature, and he would have also quelled had he been able to see the kind of awards that are now being bestowed upon Jewish works written in English and other languages that deal with the reality of Jewish Canada. I'm thinking here of another apocryphal story which I've always loved, which showed you how the Yiddish was a world unto its own. The other world outside, English and French, sometimes was filtered through, but with irony and humor. And the story told that there was a shochet who was walking quickly one day on St. Viator and passing the big church there, St. Michael's, and got sideswiped by a car and fell down and began to groan. He was not hurt, but being an older Jew, he liked to groan. He groaned aloud, whereupon a priest in the church had seen him and was really worried about this, grabbed a crucifix and ran down, and hoping to give this man his last rites and absolution, bent over him and said, "Do you believe in the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost?" And the shochet looked up and said, "Ich starb und fragt mir Kashes." I'm dying and he's asking me riddles. Now that would never work. It works better in Yiddish than in English, and I would never hope to translate it as well. And so that was Yiddish. It was not only the language which carried the memory of what was lost, what was destroyed, who were murdered, but it also carried a certain degree of levity and irony and humor, which my mother and father always sparred with, which also translated for me and years later on into my fiction and my poetry, a sense that the language would help in countering the darkness around one. Thank you all. And I just want to tell you that if you want to hear Yiddish read with English translations, my old partner Rivka Ogenfeld, former president of the Refugee Board of Quebec, and I are going on the road again after 20 years. We did a series of bilingual readings throughout Canada. We decided next spring and summer we're willing to come to book clubs, synagogues, churches, community centers, libraries, bookstores, garment stores for that matter, and we are billig viborscht. We're not like your American writers who come here who, like American doctors, charge far too much. We are willing to come at a very low fee, cover our expenses, and we're happy to start this next spring and summer. So if you really want Yiddish and you don't mind having me tell a few jokes here and there, if you like that kind of thing, look me up on the internet, find my office email, write me, and we'll book you in the tours we'll be doing from Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto, Winnipeg, wherever. We'll go wherever it's possible to go because we both enjoy sharing this language and sharing as well the fruits of our literary work. Thank you.